Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions. And today's opinions will be about Prince's Gambit by C.S. Pacat. And yep, it seems I'm in a romantasy mood, and damn is this series hitting the spot for me at the moment. This is book 2 in the Captive Prince trilogy, which means there will be spoilers for the first book. If you want to read that one without spoilers, go do that! Then come back and we can talk about Prince's Gambit. But this one starts with Damon on the road to the border with Prince Laurent and the troops the regent has assigned to them to patrol, which would be great, except Laurent and Damon are both fully aware that this is a setup to get Laurent somewhere that he can be killed and the blame shuffled off to Aklios, Damon's home country. To prevent war, Damon has pledged to help Laurent, giving up on any attempt at freedom until they can forestall or defeat whatever ambush is coming for them. Of course, it won't be easy. The regent made sure that Laurent was sent with green, disorganized troops, a captain who is determined to do the opposite of instill discipline, and spies everywhere. They are going to have to work together to survive, which is only complicated by the fact that, yeah, Laurent's troops do not exactly trust Damon. They are both keeping deeply damaging secrets from each other, and there is a growing attraction between them that is becoming more apparent by the day. And I will admit, I don't usually pick up sequels so soon after finishing a first book, and a huge part of the reason why is going to be what I'm discussing a lot in this review. And for the start, yes, part of that is that this series does sort of read as one ultra-long book. Like, yes, they definitely have their own arcs, their own climaxes, their own stories. They feel very different in a lot of ways. This one wasn't nearly as sex-soaked, but also sort of weirdly sexless as the first one is, though the tension is ramped up a lot more in this one. This one feels a lot more action-heavy. This one feels broader, less claustrophobic. We are in different places that don't feel as decadent, and we get a lot more feeling of gritty humanity behind the shiny but violent image of the Veer court. It feels like there's just a lot more pieces on the game board. But these books are so clearly part of a whole that it's pretty hard to stop at the end of each one. They are not exactly cliffhanger endings, or at least this, the first one wasn't exactly a cliffhanger ending. I may have feelings about this one, but this is the kind of series that each book ends with enough of a setup for the next book that you will almost feel like you've already started the next one. They also have very little of the last time in this series, though the third one has more. Spoiler, I've actually already read the third one when I sat down to record this review, but we're gonna pretend mostly like I haven't. But there's a lot less catching you up exposition in the beginning of this one than you get in a lot of series. It's just very clear to me that they were meant to be read one immediately after the other. And so I did. And I know that I just talked about that for a while, but I'm objectively fascinated how some books can trap me, draw me in, force me to read them at once, like in one sitting. Because there are some books that I absolutely love. They are some of my favorite books of all time. The book that I am now reading after having finished this series is Martha Wells' Queen Demon. And yeah, it's one of these that I absolutely love, but I'm also perfectly content with reading a chapter or two and putting it down for a while. But these are some of those books that I simply cannot put down. Recently, most of these wildly addictive books for me have been romantasy. And I do think part of the reason that these books are doing this for me is that they are, that yes, I am just discovering a love of this subgenre, but there's also a way that romance handles tension of all sorts, not just inherently sexual tension, but like also just tension in the story is inherently very addictive. The annoying thing is that exact same tension that I really want to examine how it works, how they build it up, keeps me reading too quickly to really stop and examine it, but eventually I'll get a handle on it. And I do think it has something to do with making sure that several threads of the story are always picked up before any threads are tied off. So like we end up having like, 4 or 5 plot threads and maybe one gets tied off, but 3 more have been introduced. But there's more to it than that, and I just haven't quite figured it out yet. But for now, all I can say is that, yeah, this style of Romantasy has been doing a damn good job of bewitching, capturing, and trapping me inside the books. But the main reason I don't usually read sequels immediately after one another is because I usually want time between books to play with the first in my mind, to break down my feelings about it, to live in those feelings. And I read this one and Captive Prince so close together, and for that matter, King's Rising so close together, that I'm gonna be honest, I had a lot of trouble setting my feelings and thoughts into a coherent review for this book. This is one of the only reviews I have ever, literally scrapped the entire review I wrote and started over. And it was covering some of the same bases, but some of them were not. And I'm still not entirely sure that I got to a very coherent place here. But I can tell you that I really enjoyed the read. I am fascinated by the way the characters are developing. And at the end of book one, we barely knew Laurent. Even though he is one of the main characters, even though he is the love interest, we really ended that book with just a vague notion of what he was like. We knew Damon pretty damn well, but this is the book where we actually get a grasp on who Laurent is. And more to the point, Damon gets a grasp on who Laurent is, and so we as readers get a better grasp on him. Because this entire series, except for 2 brief segments and some short stories, are entirely in third person, but close third person, focused on Damon. And he is a fun character to see the world through because he is impressively bad at reading between the lines, understanding subtlety, and even recognizing that someone's motivations aren't the most obvious ones. And he does get better, but he's surrounded by these people who are playing 3D chess while he is thinking in tic-tac-toe. And one thing I'm endlessly impressed with here is the fact that there are all these moments where it is so clear to the reader what is going on, while our POV character is completely unaware. But it's not annoying. It's endearing. And usually when this happens in books, I'm just furious. I'm just sitting there being like, oh my god, how have you not seen this? And part of the balance that it has achieved here is that we are seeing Damon getting better at this. He is so much better at seeing what is really in front of him by the end of this book than he was at the end of Captive Prince. And he was a lot better at it at the end of Captive Prince than he was at the beginning of Captive Prince. And overall, this is getting us to a point where finally, at the end of this one, he is able to see what people are planning, at least some of the time. And yeah, quite often it's too late for him to do anything about it, but at least he's figuring shit out. But also, we get to see him in his element in this book, being fiercely intelligent in his own way, and that provides a good balance. Because Damon is very intelligent in his own way. He's just used to thinking very straightforwardly. He's used to trusting people to actually mean what they say. And that just sets him at a disadvantage in the very, very intrigue-heavy Court of Vir. Now, there are a couple of things that at the end of this book are immensely obvious to me, and somehow he was still clueless about, but I only rolled my eyes and shouted at the book, oh my god, Damon, how do you not see this? Like once. And it was an amused shout, not the does the author think I'm dumb kind of shout. But beside loving the layers of knowledge built on Damon's character, I absolutely love the way this book built Laurent's character into a full character. The subtle little moments when we and Damon both get to see Laurent strategizing, and moments when we see him not so much strategizing as playing it by ear. The moments his strategy falls apart. Damon is beginning to pick up on the chess game in front of him, and that means that we as readers are also better equipped to appreciate what's going on. And the play. Oh my god, I loved getting to see Laurent just show a playful side. I was expecting to get to see the tender, sensitive, damaged, oh my god, he's so sweet under the ice-cold asshole exterior, but the almost childlike playfulness was such a surprise, and it was such a welcome surprise. It gave exactly what the book needed to allow these two characters to bond in a really personal level. It changes their relationship from obligation, bonds of mutual destruction, necessity, and physical attraction, to actually enjoying each other's company. it makes the building of the trust between them feel a lot deeper and more long-lasting. I can actually picture them at the end of this book just enjoying spending time together. And on that note, I love the fact that we didn't hit the moment when the characters reveal the secrets they've been hiding and suddenly hate each other for that secrecy. Like, how dare you keep this from me? And we might still get there, but we have a couple of big reveal moments in this book, and the response feels like a much more logical, no shit you would keep that from me. We are technically enemies. And I think the book does a really good job of balancing this incredibly complex interplay of enemies but allies and friends-ish, and attraction between Laurent and Damon with the layers of knowledge that they have of each other and the mystery still surrounding each other. Now, I do think that the enemies versus allies balance is not as strong with some of the other characters, because this one we do get to see a lot more of a relationship with other characters. Damon slowly builds something like friendship with a couple of members of Laurent's royal guards, and they are intensely loyal to Laurent. And they were Damon's jailers back in Arles, and it's rocky for a while, not because of, you know, him being of the enemy nation, but because he betrayed Laurent in book 1. And I just wanted him to look at them and be like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, because he needed to remind them that the events, Laurent had just had him whipped almost to death, and his betrayal basically amounted to him saying, yeah, that wasn't cool. Like, yeah, he did sort of turn Laurent over to the regent, but only in the most nebulous way. And no matter how loyal I am to someone, I cannot see myself calling it a betrayal if someone they almost killed got a little bit pissed at them. And so that felt a little bit less realistic. But it's also not that big of a part of the book. But these minor side characters being so aggressive and unwilling to bend is more noticeable, because at the same time we are seeing the signs that Laurent is clearly aware that he was in the wrong, and that Damon had no idea that his words could lead to the violence that it did, and that Damon's willingness to work with him is a sign of how forgiving and good of a person Damon is. And I actually do love the fact that Damon is almost absurdly forgiving in this book. He's a character who has fought in war and recognizes that it's both very personal and very impersonal. Violence in general isn't inherently personal to him. He understands what's really going on when it's just like survival of one versus the other. So when he does realize that what's going on around him is really a quiet war, his perpetual rage from the first book mellows. And I love that because it gives another reason for these characters to settle into a place where the enemies can start to love her. Without it being, you're so hot that I just cannot help myself. But I do also want to talk about the action in this book, because we get a pretty good amount of action in it. We get fights, a full-on battle, chase scenes, and yes, spice scenes. And I like the way they are all written. It's a very emotion-forward way of writing action. Like, I do not always know exactly what is physically happening in each of these moments. Like, after they got onto the roof in the chase scene, I could not sketch out, like, every stumble, slide, jump, or climb in their chase. But that's because instead we are focusing on how the action is affecting Damon himself. We get him being out of breath, him being worried but elated. We get the emotions of, oh God, are we gonna make it? We get emotions of like, oh God, what is Laurent doing? We get just enough of the flashes of the action to feel like it's a scene, but there's never any doubt in my mind that the important part of what's happening is how Damon and Laurent feel about what's happening. And it's interesting to me because there was a real part of me at the end of book 1 that wanted to say, are these really romantasy or just fantasy with a romantic subplot and spice? And there is such a heavy focus in Captive Prince on world building and politics and life-threatening danger. And yeah, of course, romantasies can and do have all that, but it's usually in the background to the love story, and in Captive Prince, it is much more the other way around. That the faintest hints of a love story and a buttload of sexual tension is being built up in the background of an otherwise court intrigue book. But as I progressed through this one, I was like, oh yeah, no, okay, this is 100% totally romantasy. And it's not even about how much time is spent on each aspect here. What it comes down to is how it focuses on these aspects. The way the action is written is a good example of this because, yes, the battle is important, it's interesting, it's dramatic, but it's also almost entirely about the fact that Daemon is coming to care as much, if not more, about protecting Laurent as protecting his own kingdom. And that is the love story. But all that aside, I'm still enjoying the world building here. We are physically seeing a lot more of Vir, and we get tantalizing peaks of Aklios in this one. The moment when we see Daemon actually meet Aklians again for the first time in months with new eyes is an absolutely spectacular moment. But building on my discussion of this being very romantasy heavy, the moment is more about seeing how the character of Daemon has evolved than any new world building. But we do see new culture here with the Vascan Raiders, and they too introduce a new interesting sexual politics element and sexual taboos to this story and this world. But I really just wanted to talk about the relationships mostly in this book because even with so much plot, with a good bit of action, new characters, new places, new revelations, and so much drama, this is one of those books that's just intensely about a developing relationship. And that's one of the other problems I had in trying to just solidify my thoughts on this one. It's a developing relationship. It does sort of end in a cliffhanger, this book, and not the traditional cliffhanger of, oh my god, will the characters survive, or oh my god, is the world gonna fall apart? No, the cliffhanger is, how is this gonna affect their burgeoning relationship? It is such a clear cliffhanger of, oh god, this is gonna break down the romance. And yeah, I am going to pick up the last book. Why did I write that in past tense? I picked up the next book. I already read the last one. Queen Demon, God bless her, is staring at me on the desk as I wrote this review. And I had been wanting to read that book for months. I had been coveting it desperately. And I was just letting it rot on my desk because I needed to read King's Rising. But also, spoiler, I finished King's Rising in 2 sittings. Partially because I was really enjoying this series. Partially because, yeah, these are what I used to in my childhood refer to as crack books because they are so addictive, but also because it felt like I was in the middle of a book when I finished this one. So I do 100% recommend this book, but I also recommend that you get all 3.5 of these books before you start reading any of them. Because if you're anything like me, once you pick this series up, you're not putting it down until it's done.